Well, thank you. Hopefully we can run a good panel. Am I supposed to introduce the panel, or how are they going to come up here?
I think they were just going to come up.
When I was asked to do this panel, I was reminded, old enough, remembering some old telco joke of how you build a reliable network. It takes three components: a switch, a man, and a dog. And the role of the switch is to run the network. The role of the dog is to keep the man away from the switch. The role of the man is to feed the dog. And you know, the key element that's required to actually make this work, of course, is automation, that the switch has to switch, and more broadly, the network has to work without the man monkeying with it. And so I think that's what puts us here today. So maybe the panel can go ahead and introduce themselves. We got this, my seat? Please.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you want to start with me?
Yes, please.
So I'm Joe Farrell. I work for General Electric. I'm based in Cincinnati, Ohio. Our headquarters is in Fairfield, Connecticut, moving to Boston. I'm responsible for our engineering organization for about a $1.6 billion shared service business that we run for the company. And inside of that, obviously, is the whole network architecture organization. So, and all the data centers, and very relatable to your conversation in terms of size and scale.
Hello.
Okay. Hi, I'm Farrell, working for FedEx, responsible for the global network architecture for FedEx. Same thing like what you said, same problem.
Hello, Pablo Espinoza, Intuit. I run the product infrastructure global network services division, which is really our consumer-facing products, such as TurboTax, QuickBooks, and so forth.
Hi, I'm
Sorry.
It's okay. Here, an echo. I'm Neil Sakurai. I run network architecture for Bank of New York Mellon, and I struggle with microphones. Yeah. Yeah. Who am I? I forgot. So I focus on network strategy, both how we craft the network and also how we interact with the network.
My name is Jim Unan. I'm a Director of Research and Strategy for UBS. I basically research long horizon technology for competitive advantage within the business in all the disciplines, so storage, network, and compute environments.
Well, thanks very much. I appreciate everybody participating here. So we're going to start off, we have a bunch of questions for the panel. Hopefully they can answer those and get some thinking going, and then we'll end up with a Q&A session where we can involve others. So the starting thesis here is that we all agree that we need to move to a software managed infrastructure for better agility, efficiency, and better availability. Is everybody on board with that?
Yeah,
Yes. Sure. You know, I sometimes think we should have this perspective of, at least I carry this, of, you know, you find yourself in a nursing home and your grandchildren show up and say, Grandma or Grandpa, is it really true that back then you allowed people to put their fingers on these switches that were running your critical infrastructure or whatever, and you know, then say, well, what did you do about it? And so I think this is where we are. Everybody's on board with this. So let's see, anybody have any quibbles or comments with our statement or focus to what we should be thinking about here?
I'll just make a comment from our perspective. From what I'm seeing in my huge network is, it's not a function of should we do it, we absolutely have to do it. It's a function of how you're going to do it. Because we're dealing with a large legacy implementation. Some very new implementations around our core and so on, very relatable, and then the services that kind of hang it all together. So you know, it's where do you start? It's really the hard part, from my perspective.
Anybody want to add anything?
Yeah, I want to comment too, because the idea of when we're talking about infrastructure as a code, people are always thinking about like software only, but it's bigger than that. Exactly the same as earlier. How about the business processes? How about basically the culture? How about basically what actually we to talk about it? Where basically we're talking about I do it always what we do always right now. That has to change. So there is a change culture, the whole thing, so the whole gamut of just not just software only.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that the technology part is considerably more easy than the business process changes that are required. I've been at places where we built systems that were very innovative, but we were unable to get any buy-in to change any business process, no matter how small. So I think organizationally, and I hate to say it politically within firms, it's a difficult challenge to change those processes, to wrap around the technology and enable the better use of the technology.
Just to double click that, I mean, change management processes that we have to protect our firms are in place, and you folks are relatively belonging for our safety.
Now I need to go to a different problem. Suggesting that we're going to remove a change management process is a culture change, and we need to understand that as we automate, we also need to keep some controls in place to make sure something doesn't go rogue and destroy an entire network.
I would agree with that, but I would also say there's a ton of process that is not specifically designed as a protection mechanism within the firm. There are processes that we followed before technology can enable us to do things in a more agile way.
I think, speaking as a university professor, I think we do an amazing job of preparing the younger generation for these sort of problems, where you give them an assignment, when it's done, they turn it in, and they can forget about it. So they keep encountering this clean slate over and over again, and then they hit the real world and they encounter all these considerations. So I think it's good. So I think we've heard how difficult it is. It's not possible to do this all at once. So can we get the panel to talk about what your first priorities are? How do you find a way to move the mountain closer to Mohammed?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't, I'll chime in first, and I won't do it the next time. How about that? So we're instantiating a brand new core, and really a brand new cloud core as well for our network, because we're big cloud consumers. We've even seen drift and configuration across that core, because time happened, new ideas happened, and people want to be smart. So step one for me is to go to that core, make sure the instantiation is very consistent, identical across the various sites that we have, and then automate that. And then start building from there into the cloud core and so on. And then, thirdly, for me is something as basic as DNS needs to be rock solid, automated, humans aren't allowed to touch it, those kinds of events. And we just don't have that today. And so those are kind of the three focus areas around networking that I hope to drive.
So more generally, I think what I've seen happen a bit organically is we either go after the things that are really easy to automate, so we just try to collect all the low-hanging fruit, or we try to tackle a very large problem such as service orchestration. So what are all the things that need to be automated to produce an actual consumable product that a business wants? The latter actually takes much longer to do, but has much more value than just automating a very small part of a long process that maybe didn't really take all that long to do in the first place. So I'm kind of seeing those two approaches emerging.
I'll take a little bit on that as well. For us specifically, we sort of took form of which is what things are out there that are highly repeatable types of things that we can potentially look at as a problem solver, right? And being able to identify what that is, and essentially focusing on that, kind of prove out the capabilities of what the value we get from the automation piece. And a great example, this might get to your next question, David, so this snacking, I'm getting ahead of you, but
you guys are doing this to me.
There's something pretty powerful about putting a software developer and an infrastructure person in one room and solving some pretty big key problems, right? I think and being able to share each other's knowledge and kind of go at it together with sort of this DevOps mindset and culture. I think that's kind of the focus we have, where we really just key in on very specific metrics, things that we want to achieve.
So far, it's been pretty good for us.
I would also add that there's requires a high level of trust. So anytime you want to innovate things, driving things into an organization, you have to get people to buy in, you have to get them to trust. And a lot of people are reluctant to change. And you have to approach it in such a way that you build their trust with the given system and allow them sort of to take it, feel comfortable with it, and build a groundswell around. I'm sorry, now you're affecting me. Build a groundswell around. Can you still hear me? Yeah. So kind of build that support. And what I've found is if you try to ram something in or push it or you run to the business and suggest this is a huge value and you force things in, those things are rarely ever adopted in a good way.
I just wonder in these comments, is there a danger when we identify these priorities, like you've talked about sort of finding easy things to do, that if Henry Ford was doing incremental, would he come up with an automated horse feeder rather than a Model T? And is there a danger that we're just kind of digging ourselves further in, making the existing processes easier, which makes it harder to get out of?
I would say that Henry Ford didn't have 15,000 previously existing things to compete with, and so he had a clean slate.
I think there was more horses.
I mean, I think there's a risk of that for sure. You know, one of the things that we try to do, and I don't know that we're always as effective as we need to, is we really assess things you know, kind of holistically, say, do we need it, right? I mean, my background is more on the data center side, and we talk about all the applications that we have, and we're just, there's just a full-on attack to saying, do we need these things? Do they still serve a purpose? Or are we doing it just because we always have, right? And I think a lot of our processes, I mean, to me, this is not a technology discussion at all, it's a process discussion. All the processes are burdened from the 10 years ago decision or the failure that we had, or the outage, that we automated the failure, and you've got to do it now forever, you know, in purgatory, effectively. So we're trying to rip all that out and just try to do as much of a whiteboard as we can from a process perspective, and then implement technology around it, if that makes any sense.
And then that's back to get the idea that if you lock in yourself, like the hardware lock-in that we've been talking over here, how you can go into the danger of this become a software lock-in is always there. Back into the processes that we start having this processes running stuff and the organization running stuff, then you build your own content, then hopefully that's where you can move forward and not the openness.
You can see sort of two different takes on this, and one is looking at your existing infrastructure and say, you know, like you're mentioning with DNS, you know, what's one thing that I can make better across this, which is kind of a horizontal attack is the way I think of it. Another approach is more of a greenfield. Let's set up a new world that's only a piece, but demonstrate how things can be done in a new way. It's more of a almost a vertical attack that says there's a new set of rules, there's a new way of doing things, but just with this one slice here. People have comments about do you do both, or which one works the best?
I think the latter of the two actually allows you to get that trust you require. So you build it and they come, and when they experience it, they're like, oh wow, these are things we can't do, or our processes take 9 months to get a server provisioned and built, and in this environment we can do it in 3 minutes. And so those kind of things are really beneficial. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but at the very minimum they build the opportunity for people to experience things that maybe they didn't really consider. So right. I think there's value in it.
Yeah, we will do both basically, because literally what you need to do is like what you mentioned, the greenfield is easier. So that's we call it the guinea pig, where basically that's where we can pull. Part of the trust will be belief. If you believe, then it's a lot easier to move forward. The brownfield is a challenging, like I said earlier, it's really challenging by itself. But you have to pick small pieces and do them to practice it and function.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I think so. I think Greenfield is always kind of a nice shiny thing over you, right? I mean, that's the reality is, and you know, I'm not sure I feel the same thing, but the reality is that many business processes kind of get in the way of trying to do a Greenfield. It's very difficult to kind of focus on how do you sell to the business in terms of doing something that has not been proven or not had those capabilities yet. So, in our approach, we certainly we did a bit of a hybrid, but the large focus was on taking the ground, right? And it evolved and it's grown, right? But both sides, regardless of how you look at it, still presents kind of some challenge, right? Today, you're taking software and you're building, essentially applying configuration and changes to the environment that now presents a whole different set of operational issues, right? And we're learning from this real life is, there's a certain way of how you want to build that software to what it's Greenfield is around that perspective.
But I think it's really about incentivizing moving to the Greenfield, and it's about making that Greenfield a great place to be. And I think we underestimated the amount of Greenfield opportunities we actually have on a day-to-day basis. Yes, we have existing infrastructures, there's thousands of applications that that are there and may not be as automatable, but there's new workloads coming at us daily. Business units are requesting new capacity. We're talking about private and hybrid and public, and all of these present a new a new opportunity to interact with the network and the infrastructure in general in a different way. One thing that's an interesting thing that we've done a little bit is to take very fresh eyes and look at these problems and say, here's this thing. How would you interact with this thing? Not knowing the 15 years of past history about CLIs and config scripts and these type of things, and it's changed the way that we've started to do that, and then as I said, making that a really great place to be for the business, gets you a little bit of credit at the table when those actually start happening. Say, oh, my life is much better here. I can get a service in an hour versus 30 days.
Yeah, I think you have to do both. The reality of it is, minimally you're going to connect them both, right? Because we sort of have one big network. I think what we're all faced with, unfortunately, is to the user, to the consumer, it's a plug in the wall and it just works. They don't really understand the detail, don't want to know the detail, and assume that there is none. So motivating them to a happier place, they just want it to perform and they want it up all the time. Just like when we're at home, we want our internet to be up all the time. We don't really care what our cable provider is doing. So, what we've done to try to motivate businesses is we've attacked obsolescence financially. So if a business owns a site and they're dealing with a fair amount of obsolescence in it, then we sort of charge for that to try to motivate change. In some of my plants, and GE is a big place, they're running Cat 3 wiring. There's a big CapEx investment required to drive change in that environment. So as we drive through and modernize those places, it's a major undertaking for the P&L owner, which is that plant manager. So for that person, it is, hey, my network works today. I want it to work tomorrow, and I don't want to spend any money. So we have to really find creative ways to motivate. To your point, I agree 100%. Motivate based on availability and performance and just capability.
Nice.
So I got a question. I think so and I work for Bank of America, right? We had thousands of branches, tens of thousands plus of ATMs, right? We have 135,000 production servers, right? So when we start talking about brown and greenfield network automation strategies, could you give us a little insight into how you attack the problem, right? So I think we're all on board with what the problem is and why we need to solve it and how we incentivize it. But how do you take a problem where you've got a huge branch office environment, gigantic data centers, right? Remote sites like ATMs that could exist, in a small alcove in the middle of a mall, right? How do we start building network strategies that drive automation into these components? And what are your thoughts about how do we break that problem up into chunks that become solvable? And how do we leverage both existing infrastructure tools and open tools to help solve that problem?
I'd like to take that one on.
I'll take tough question.
Yeah.
Tough question, Mr. Ernst.
It's too soft up there. It's too neat.
I'll kind of answer that in two parts. I think the first part, there's a fundamental people challenge, right? And in that realm, essentially, is kind of what I mentioned earlier, is there has to be a mechanism in how you bring together a software developer and an infrastructure expert. Because the reality is you're not going to find, at least not today, the deep level of skill set that complements each other in one person, right? So organizationally, in terms of how we tackled it, we certainly brought those organizations together with very, very defined problems to solve, right? And focused on metrics-based and outbound-based type of things. So there was a fundamental culture shift there, right? And a mindset shift in terms of these two teams working together, but I think that's evolved and that continues to evolve. The second part of the answer to me is more on the capability and the technology side of it, right? And I'll give you a very simple example. We certainly don't have as many changes as BOD, but we run probably around 2,000 changes per 2,000 changes per month, being able to take and understand, for example, the majority of those are access list changes, or they might be bit deployments, bit revisions, and so forth, right? And really looking at that and asking yourself, and I ask myself, do I want my top level engineers deploying those services, versioning those services, or can I automate that, right? And that's really where we started to fundamentally look at some of the opportunities. And take it a step further and not just say, not just automate, but build a self-service model to hand to your customers, your delivery folks, your app ops, whoever that is, to be able to deliver those services on their own. Just empower them, right? So that we can actually also focus on the back and stuff. And I think that's continued to evolve. I mean, it's been a fairly successful journey. However, there's still challenges along the way around culture, even looking at it from an SDLC perspective, how you apply SDLC to infrastructure as well.
But I think it can't be underestimated that you need to partner with your business. You need to show them the value, and then that is a snowball that will roll downhill, and that you have more opportunities to automate more and more and more. We went through a similar exercise. We've taken a look at the amount of time that we've charted out in a month to do changes, and it is more than a month, right? So we think we need more time that a month holds in order to do the amount of changes that we need to do. That is an automation problem, right? That screams automate me. But to beat the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, you need to prove through evidence that it works, that it's sustainable, that it's not going to hurt the business, and I think that's a partnership problem.
So I'll share what we're doing, and our journey is just beginning. But we are, if you look at our network, there's the core, which is arguably probably the most important, that has to stay up all the time. We have our cloud edge core. We have our remote sites, which are largely offices, shared buildings, which is complicated, and you have manufacturing plants. We're starting on the manufacturing plants as we modernize them. To modernize them, solve the sort of layer 1 problems and even the executive layer 9, 10, 11, whatever problems from a personnel perspective, and automating that as we modernize. And then on the cloud instantiations, as we move to cloud, we're modernizing that in terms of automation. On the core side, I think we made a mistake and we did not automate it, and we should have as we put it in. And we will go back and do that. But the people who are allowed to touch that automation code are different in all those camps.
That was the heart of the question. How you guys tackle that problem?
Yep.
So why don't we move on to our third question here, which is, what are the couplings you see between network, storage, and compute in tackling these transitions to automation? Anybody care to take that one on first?
The way we do it is back to the business, asking what they're having problem with. We are actually facilitating an open stack, for example, not because just the automation is there, however, how we really creating services to the business. from the reading of the magazine or such, basically everybody wants fast. The question is, how do we get doing it? There is a perception that basically that can be done because everybody can go to the cloud directly. The coupling that you do is basically like how do you really start creating the service. What we do like 6 months or whatever per day to build something and reducing it back to the belief. And then after that, then you can really go down into the network itself. That's how we take the approach from top to bottom.
Yeah, I agree. You know, we talk a lot about outcome basis, and an outcome is not a network port, right? An outcome is, you know, an ecosystem that an application developer wants or a customer wants. So we're trying to abstract some of that from the discussion, and that will allow us to automate it and gain some more control of it. But definitely to the point, I mean, we're headed down the OpenStack path as well. And it's as much just to drive change as it is to consume something different. We're big users of Amazon. We will be big users of Microsoft and Oracle and all the other clouds. You know, so whenever one of our developers goes to Amazon, they don't really think about this stuff too much. They want an instance, and the instance needs to have these characteristics, and they kind of think about it in terms of the overall outcome versus the individual pieces. And even organizationally, we're trying to tear down those boundaries. It says you're a network person, you're a compute person, you're a virtualization person. We're really trying to blend that, albeit very difficult to do. That's our fundamental desire.
Anybody else doing blending here? Or non-blending?
I don't know about blending, right? I'm a little bit afraid that we're going to create, you know, masters, jacks of all trades, but masters of none. And when we have issues, we're not going to have subject matter expertise in areas that they can dig into it. But I think there's a big value in understanding the things that are necessary to host an application. And you know, as your business unit is asking you for application hosting, they're not asking you for switch ports, to Joe's point. Right. It's, you know, you have to understand the outcome basis. I think that's a great point. And network automation is a piece of that. But the pre-positioning a switch port without understanding when that server is coming in, and then, you know, there's a myriad of higher level things that need to be done for a service, but you need to get to the service understanding of what it all takes.
I think we spent a lot of time in the industry siloing off technology. We pass requirements between groups from storage to network, from compute to network, and we treat it like it's not a single system. And there's a huge problem in that. There's a huge disconnect there to deny the fact that in order for me to do IP storage, I need a network and it needs to be designed properly is just plain ignorance. And that's been going on for 15 years now. And so we're finally coming around back to where people need to have a good understanding of how a system works. And this is one system, let's not ignore it. Any distributed, large-scale distributed system requires compute, CPU, memory, and storage to operate. And if I don't relate those things in a single holistic view, then I'm not designing it properly. So I think that the networking and storage areas are somewhat behind the compute environments because we've commoditized compute environments down to, you know, replacing vendors at will, standards across the board. But in the network space, we're still tied to a specific vendor because of management systems, because of things like that. And storage is the same way. So I think we're on a path, but I think that there's still a long way to go and to bring that coupling back to where it needs to be.
You think, though, I guess I'm a bit of a network bigot because, you know, that if a server fails, the network fails, you know, the business is on the line. And so it seems like perhaps networking is behind because it's so critical, and perhaps we need to treat it very carefully as the key underpinnings for everything.
I don't disagree. I think it's a foundational application. I think a network is a foundational application, but if they're built right, I can suffer a fail. If Netflix loses a component in their environment, right, they still continue to function. I think a network can function the exact same way. We build tons of resiliency in our network. It doesn't mean that we can't automate it, that we can't replace hardware at will with vendor A to vendor B. It doesn't mean that I can't consume telemetry data from the all the components in my network in a common way, in a common schema, with a common data model, so that I can make assumptions about the environment. And I think that's where we're behind. I don't disagree with your point. I just think that's where we're kind of a little bit behind.
I also think it's about network virtualization. So the network as a single unit is this one big fault domain. So I definitely agree, if you create the foundation, the entire organization that it supports comes down. But if you can virtualize on top of that and let tenants run in their own space, it changes that paradigm a little bit. It lets me move a little bit more agilely in different virtual tenant spaces, as long as they're protected and those type of controls that we see in distributed systems happening in networks as well.
So what tools and products are you seeing that support the directions you want to go, and what do you see as lacking for getting there in tools? Or is I'm tempted to find that people are going to say that's not the problem, it's people, but why don't we focus on the tools and technology first?
We have every tool created in man, and we have tools that I don't even think we know we have. So my approach there is to try to be, and I won't name vendors, I don't know that I'm even capable at this stage, but is kind of looking at each tool and saying, what outcome does it deliver? What piece of data does it do? What monitoring does it do? Put it all on a piece of paper and then start Xing things off that have overlap. That's how I'm going to start. How I finish, I don't know. But certainly compute-based tools, or things that have traditionally been orchestrating compute, things like Chef and Puppet and all those kinds of things, have to start working in a very meaningful way back towards the network.
Anybody else have comments on tools or what's there and what's missing?
I think back to the whole discussion today, the tooling for the technical piece, there is a piecemeal for each one of them. The one that we're looking even during the board meeting is always about the orchestration, the MOM, the controller of the controller, is the policy engine. How do you really basically start putting the business and the technical piece in the same place? Regardless, like, you can use the way we do it is always the same way, and we got so many tools. Anybody, we call it like the best buy, like everything. If there is any vendor who bought it, that's always the key there. The way is basically how we use this together, because we really want the best of the tools for every technology. The static part is the hard one. Compliance is another thing we want to put it on the table here, where compliance is quite a nightmare. Security, the one where basically that, yeah, you can have all the tools, but they always neglecting part of the security piece and the compliance piece.
Yeah, and for us, it's kind of the same ordeal. I don't think there's any surprise on the responses in terms of tools. I mean, same situation, right? Just a high volume of tools that we have in the environment. But I think one focus, one area that has started a lot of value is, and I'm assuming that many of you have the same situation, is data sources are there. I mean, you can go and essentially take any sort of data source, either from directly from infrastructure or even directly from the tool. I think where we're starting to sort of should focus on is how do you aggregate all that data in an intelligent way, but then take it into a step further and start to either build out or potentially even use something commercially off the shelf that can present that data for you in a very intuitive way that is actionable, readable, and so forth. So that's been a big focus for us.
So I guess, is there any unique requirements that your organization has that hasn't come up, like multi-vendor, multi-tenancy, hybrid clouds, or any of those sort of things that you think people aren't paying enough attention to, or you're struggling with in your own organization?
I mean, one of the things that I'm starting to see, it really actually scares me a little bit, is we have a very purposeful network design that will support multiple clouds. And now I'm starting to see multiple clouds. So I worry about the day whenever I've got an application that spans Oracle, SAP, Amazon, Microsoft, and internal. And will the network design and the speed of light allow that to work properly. And I think that for me, that day is probably less than 6 months ahead. So how do you troubleshoot that, right? So we can have the best architecture in the world. We can have the best partnerships with the cloud providers in the world. If our operational teams don't have the instrumentation, or most importantly, the skill set to be able to go troubleshoot that, it really frightens me.
Yeah, just to go double click on that again, we focused, I think, a lot of this conversation on service orchestration, deploying stuff, but not on pulling stuff back out of the network. And I think that's a big problem. If I can automate it quickly, but I'm blind to it and I don't know where it went and I can't, figure out what my network topology is now, it's a huge problem. We need to focus as much on automating, pulling telemetry and normalizing it and doing analytics on top of it. And in fact, I think that's a lot of what Nick previewed on the initiatives, kind of get at that. Certainly the network state one does, but it's not unique to network state. Most of these are saying, yeah, let's deal with things in a common format, in a common way, and we'll set the stage for that. But I think the analytics and telemetry is, there's a lot of interested parties, but it's not as advanced as I would like it to be.
And just to add on, from an operational aspect, that configuration that I highlighted, A, is real. B, to me, in my heart, proves why we need some kind of DevOps configuration around that, up the stack, right? So we can't be traditionalist and have a network team that worries about the network pieces of that, and then an Amazon team and an Oracle team and so on. It just won't work. And I would argue in today's environment, we're slow because of that. Because we have those silos of talent, and it's still hot potato. Very fast hot potato, but it's hot potato.
So, I'm sorry. I'm just curious, Joe, would you say that's a situation where maybe technology was adopted ahead of being able to deal with it, or to provide it properly, or is that what?
Yeah, no, it's a fair question. And I ask myself that question all the time. Why would I go, and I'm not sure if Oracle's here or not, why would I go into Oracle's cloud and help them build that whenever they're not really ready? And I think what we want to do is we're imagining a world that is 3 or 4 or 5 years out, and we're trying to get there faster. So we don't want to go through let's centralize and host on Exadata, and then let's move the Exadata after we've done all of that into Oracle. We want to skip a step. Right? Because we know eventually it's going to be SaaS or PaaS, and we want to get there much faster and not burn that effort. So I would say that's the answer. We're going to do it, and we'll feel the bumps and pain around it, but we probably won't do it with our pick a number of applications that I shared last night. We won't do it with all those applications. We'll start small.
So, sure.
During the last ONUG, Steve Gannon from JP Morgan Chase said that one of his biggest difficulties in changing his infrastructure is that it actually has to get signed off by 100 people. There is this chaining, it's like, okay, if this change is going to affect you, you've got to sign off on this. So having automation tools is really great, but there's also the business process that needs to be reworked, as well. So I guess the question is any of the solutions that the industry offers, if it just deals with auto configuration of an infrastructure, should it also include a kind of a process, where these changes get approved by people, and can we automate that part as well, or are they just totally disconnected?
I think that's the inherent trust question or statement that someone mentioned. To me, none of this conversation, or most of this conversation, is about technology. If we got all the business process out of the way and we were just solving it for ourselves, I promise you we would automate it and it would look beautiful and you wouldn't make any money off of it. But I think there has to be a revolution inside the business with business process, inside of the process individuals that run our ITIL and change and all those systems. And frankly, in terms of our leadership, we can't overreact when we have a failure, and we do it, right? So, to me, if we have to go at it both ways. We have to go at it. I don't think you can tool that piece. I think you have to educate that piece, and I think you have to earn the trust on that piece in a small, meaningful way. But that's the heavy lifting. The heavy lifting to me is not technology.
I wonder in this vein, to me, if you look at sort of the modern web companies, if I can call it that, Netflix, Google, Facebook, and so on, that they're really, their structures, they're architected for change. They have many versions running at the same time. They don't talk about greenfield and brownfield. There's dark brown, light brown, yellow, and so on, all the way through to bright green, and it's all running simultaneously. And they have automated canary testing. They have this continuous process of change, so there isn't a, lead weight holding them down. Do you see a need to re-architect for change, tying more? Just this is a mindset almost.
I think they were fortunate enough to come up in a time when they were sort of ahead of most of us here. I think deal with 7,000, 8,000 applications that were written 15 years ago. The business spent a ton of, someone mentioned, I think it was you mentioned how much a line of code costs.
Yeah.
We're not going to throw that code out, and unfortunately we're forced with having to support it. On top of that, the main large providers have a subset of applications, maybe 30, and I think that's a large number that they have to support. We have 8,000 Pablo Picassos that are each a masterpiece in their own. And how are we going to architect for all these very beautiful and wonderful creations that are, custom in every aspect, So that's part of our problem, I think.
And it's understanding what, in all those Picassos, where is the resilience, right? So if your resilient layer is in the infrastructure, you need to be very safe with it. If your resiliency is in applications, then your infrastructure can be designed for fail. So you brought the question about coupling between network servers and storage. It's really a coupling of network servers and storage and applications. And unless we understand that, we can't get there.
I agree on all the points. It's interesting. I spent some time last night talking about this, and we evangelized this inside of GE. We've been solving application problems in infrastructure for all of my career, even back in the mainframe days. So I think now is the time that applications really need to use the tendency of what's capable in infrastructure versus we're going to design code the way we design code for the last 20 years. So, we're really pushing hard on that aspect in the context of bringing talent in, so then and teaching them how to code in a meaningful new way. That then we can make the pivot on bringing in OpenStack or any kind of open kind of device. I mean, I still have people that tell me they want the HP server with this kind of memory and the EMC storage. I have those requests. I don't have requirements oftentimes. So, I think until we turn that corner, we're going to struggle. But I can tell you we're turning that corner, and we're using the cloud march to do that. I know there's a big debate tomorrow about cloud, but we're actually using that to really change the culture.
So go ahead.
I think it was mentioned that we are telling that we cannot run storage, server, and network as a code, right? But I think David is already working on an idea where he's trying to put everything on a code in one box where storage is inside, servers are also safe, and backup is also within, right? So that's already in progress. So why can't we have that as a code in single network plus storage in one box, right? Or two different boxes, and it resolves the problem, right? You don't have to worry about different vendors of storage, backup, as well as servers and all those things.
But there's a management problem with that structure. So if I take a rack, I put a compute environment in a rack like you're describing, and I've seen vendors come in about storage all over, telling me I could cut my CapEx cost in half if I bought 50 or 100 of these little devices over an EMC box, right? And they're right, I could cut my CapEx, but what's my OpEx look like, and how do I move my applications in and out of these environments? So where is the management structure around this that enables me to do that? Yes, CapEx is somewhat important, but my OpEx is through the roof in an environment like that, and that's what I need to get away from. So I need to be able to manage an environment. I want my workload to go wherever I need to. If I have available compute in my data center, I want to consume it. Okay, if I go on weekends, I want to turn my compute off. I want to save power during the weekends. I want that level of control. If Coke can tell me when someone bought a machine in Plano, Texas, took a Coke out of their machine, why can't I tell you what the status of my compute environment is today? Right now in real time. And I can't do that. And the industry needs to help me do that. I need to be able to consume these events in real time and make inference about what the state of my plant is. And I can't do that just by building a single box or an environment and throwing my applications in there. It doesn't enable me to get to this kind of nirvana. I hope that answered the question.
Sure. So let me get to the final question, which is talking about what are realistic timeframes to get to any kind of milestones you've set. Are we still in science experiment land, or is it really happening, or are we somewhere in between here?
I guess I have the mic, so. I don't know if I think you know, maybe we should learn from how applications are moving to CI/CD kind of paradigms and say we're going to keep iterating and iterating and iterating, and I don't know if we'll ever reach a goal. I mean, we'll get better and better and better and better, and as we go along this journey, the target may change and it may keep moving farther out. At least I hope so. It keeps me employed. So, you know, I don't know if there's a, you know, this will be done in 3 years.
I do. It won't.
So David, is the question actually, is it in terms of whether this is actually happening today?
Yeah.
And the automation piece,
or when
right?
do you expect this to be
Yeah,
happening?
I mean, and I'm
when
looking,
do you take your hands off the wheel and it's driving itself?
Yeah.
You know?
And it's interesting looking at the stats right now. It's good to see that. You know, for us, it's a little bit of both. There's a lot of iteration happening, right? A lot of experimentation that's happening. There's a lot of fast fail, fast learn type of approach with all of the automation capabilities. But on the positive side it is happening. You know, and I'll give you a quick metric here. I mean, we've got about for our total changes, we've got about 65% of our total change volume already automated, right? In a way that we've established just tremendous velocity on delivering the service, right? From months to days, and in some cases even hours. So it is happening. I think the challenge, and I think Joe was alluding to this earlier, it's really around, you know, it's in many cases business processes, you know, and I think having a way to sell and prove those capabilities out, I think is also another big challenge that the industry has.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's happening. I mean, I was, you know, one of my new responsibilities is to make this happen. I haven't been given a time frame yet, but you know, all deadlines in GE are unreasonable, so I'm sure it'll be less than 3 years. But I think it's a function of scope, right? So can we scope it such that we can take victory laps, make a meaningful difference, and you know, it's easy to answer the question of why though. So the speed of business it's a hockey stick for us, and you know, with the incredible change that we're going through from a business process perspective, there's a little more acceptance, not a lot, but a little more acceptance. So we want to strike while the iron's hot. So you know, I think in 18 to 24 months time, we will have automated something significant. I don't know that I can get to those numbers in the context of automating that percentage change, but we will have solved our core, or we will have solved our cloud hub, or whatever, in some reasonable amount of time.
We should open this up to invite more questions from the audience at this stage. Go ahead.
How do you guys see education changing around this as networking kind of disappears, I guess, kind of as it merges with computer science and infrastructure is going to all this code? How do you see that education as having to change? Right now we have a lot of vendor locked in certifications and all that. What would you like to see with that changing?
Sorry. So the way we're looking at it, and this is a fairly recent thing, and I've got a lot of passion around it, is there are two spectrums of hiring that I want to do, or that I will do, is you're still going to hire those CCIE pluses if you can find them. You need them, you need those deep experts, so whenever either the legacy environment has a problem or new architecture is needed, you're still going to hire those guys. But our intent is to go get software developers out of college and very targeted, put them in as many or as few locations as we can, and drive this conversation. So we intend on going down a path, not worrying as much about do you have a network background or not, but really driving this whole software conversation with that millennial talent almost exclusively, so then they don't have the baggage that a 28-year veteran like myself does.
I think what I like to see is basically the idea that when you have computer science, they teach you not just about the programming, but also about the life cycle. You're also talking about how do you do the right thing in terms of to the basic, even to the basic of check-in and check-out of like a program. The networking guy usually doesn't have it because they've been doing it one way or the other through change management and such. What I like to see is basically that become more degrees, because what you need is really the base. It's not about basically how the network is work, but when it's broken, how you really still need the CCI of the world, because really you need the underlying, the BGPs, the protocol itself. How do you really troubleshoot become more difficult because everything is a pancake. So how you really fix that, that's kind of where you really need more base infrastructure, kind of base protocol, base TCP IP and all that technologies.
Any other questions from the audience? Yes.
Yeah, you were talking earlier about the monitoring nirvana, but I know in our environment, one of the things that we're starting to see is that much data collection to be able to see what's going on in your network starts to become a significant part of your overall traffic. What are ways that you are looking at reducing that? Monitoring shouldn't be a quarter of your bandwidth.
You feel emotions, go.
I would think that we need to change the way we do monitoring, right? So the way we handle monitoring today is not really real time in any essence. If you look at any large academic grids or some of the government's environments, they basically emit sensor data that's very small and can be consumed in real time. And as these events occur, they can also spin up more and more listeners. So if you look at Hadoop or something like that, and you do use Kafka to consume those messages, you can build an analytics cluster today that can consume that, and you can do it without killing your entire network, just consuming that data. So I think the paradigm around monitoring has to change. SNMP, I get the calls from the users before I get the SNMP trap that something went away. I mean,
but you know, if I can just shove in something, just not that I know anything about this, but I wonder if we have to change our thinking. You know, why is 25% not a reasonable price to pay to stay alive? You know, we're in an industry where the bandwidth has gone up by factors of 10 several times, and you say, well, this is survival, guys. You know, will we pay that? I recall talking to a guy, this is before self-driving cars, somebody from Audi telling me that in the software in their cars, 90% of the software is diagnostic software. You know, I mean, is that wrong? Well, maybe not. Maybe we just have to adjust our thinking that we should spend serious resources on this, because it is a matter of survival.
I think it's tough when you pay a great deal of money for an optic, right? The cost of your network is very high. The cost of bandwidth is still very high. So if we commoditize, then that can come down, and we can build much wider and much bigger networks, then I think the bandwidth is easy. But I'm also very interested in and I'm not sure if it's what kind of marketing term it is at current, but things like fog computing that's doing a lot of analytics on the edge, but only reporting results back. So don't pull all of your data into some central repository, but pre-process it at the edge and then bring only the important stuff back and leave all the noise in the garbage can. So those things are they're interesting in oil and gas environments, but I really like that idea for data centers as well, because I'm with you. I don't want to flood my uplinks that are carrying user traffic or important data traffic with monitoring, because what will happen is when the monitoring steps on somebody's job, an actual application process, they're going to say, whoa, 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 doctor's killing the patient, you got to turn this off.
We're going to have
Yeah.
Well, I think we've pretty much exhausted everybody here, so thanks very much, and I'm sure we'll all be around to discuss it further.